Bart Ehrman, everyone's favorite. Bart Ehrman, Christian who became an agnostic, textual critic. Bart Ehrman. Muslims point to Bart Ehrman because they never actually read his books. If they were to take anything he's ever said seriously, they'd have to reject Islam because what Ehrman says we can know about Jesus and his early followers completely destroys what Muhammad said about Jesus and his early followers. Muslims ignore everything Ehrman actually says because they have to ignore everything he actually says in order to continue living with the delusion that Bart Ehrman agrees with them. You know what's cool about Ehrman, apart from the way he wrecks Jesus mythers? I mean, if you want to see Ehrman go off, watch an atheist tell him that there's no evidence that Jesus existed. Hilarious stuff. But apart from Ehrman crushing the claims of Muhammad and making Jesus mythers look like total morons, he says stuff like this. This is a Facebook post in which Ehrman lists his reasons for loving Christmas. Here at the end, he shares his final reason. The image of God it conveys. The God of Christmas is not a God of wrath, judgment, sin, punishment, or vengeance. He is a God of love, who wants the best for people and gives of himself to bring peace, joy, and redemption. That's a great image of a divine being. This is not a God who is waiting for you to die so he can send you into eternal torment. It is a God who is concerned for you and your world, who wants to solve your problems, heal your wounds, remove your pain, bring you joy, peace, happiness, healing, and wholeness. Can't we keep that image with us all the time? Can't we affirm that view of ultimate reality 52 weeks of the year instead of just a few? I myself do not believe in God, but if I did, that would be the God I would defend, promote, and proclaim. Enough of war, enough of starvation, enough of epidemics, enough of pain, enough of misery, enough of abject loneliness, enough of violence, hatred, narcissism, self-aggrandizement, and suffering of every kind. Give me the God of Christmas, the God of love, the God of an innocent child in a manger, who comes to bring salvation and wholeness to the world, the way it was always meant to be. Notice that when Ehrman refers to the God of Christmas, he isn't referring to the holiday or anything to do with Santa Claus or reindeer. He's focusing on the birth of Jesus and what it means in Christianity. So Ehrman doesn't like the idea of a God of judgment, but he does like the idea of a God of love. He likes the concept of a God who loves people so much that he enters into creation as Jesus of Nazareth in order to give us a new life and a relationship with him. The main reason Muslims have never been able to understand the incarnation, God taking on a human nature, isn't that it's somehow impossible. Muslims believe that God is powerful enough to do whatever he wants. So if God wanted to enter creation, he obviously could. The real reason they can't get their minds around the incarnation is that they don't believe in a God who loves people enough to do something like that. The Quran is filled with verses about Allah not loving people. Allah does not love those who exceed the limits. Allah does not love any ungrateful sinner. Allah does not love the unbelievers. Allah does not love the unjust. Allah does not love him who is proud or boastful. Allah does not love the extravagant. Allah does not love the treacherous. Allah does not love the mischief makers. Allah does not love any arrogant boaster. According to the Quran, Allah will only love you if you first love him. Jesus condemns this sort of love. He says in Matthew 5, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? If you love unbelievers or the unjust or your enemies, you're more loving than Allah. Think about that. What sense does it make for a human being to be greater than God in some important way? And yet the world is filled with people who are more loving than Allah. I love people more than Allah does, and I'm a psychopath. But we're not more loving than the God of the Bible, the God who entered this world and allowed himself to be tortured and killed by people he created in order to take the punishment that those people deserved. Ehrman no longer believes in God, but sometimes when he talks about Christianity, it's clear that he misses parts of the Christian message. Not all of it, but parts of it. Ehrman here reminds me of Charles Templeton. Templeton used to preach alongside his dear friend Billy Graham. Then one day he was looking at a photograph of an African woman who was holding her dead baby, and he concluded that God doesn't exist. He spent years trying to convince Billy Graham that Christianity was false, but Billy Graham went on to preach the gospel to more people than anyone else in history. Lee Strobel interviewed Templeton for the book The Case for Faith. When Templeton talked about God, he was pretty hostile and absolutely adamant that God doesn't exist. But when Lee asked him about Jesus, Templeton said that Jesus was the greatest human being who has ever lived. Much to Lee's surprise, Templeton also said, "I miss him." Templeton had spent decades criticizing Christianity, and he had tried to destroy the faith of one of the greatest evangelists of all time. But he was honest enough to admit that in spite of his staunch opposition towards Christianity, he still missed Jesus. I think Bart Ehrman misses Jesus. It's kind of strange to miss a person who died nearly 2,000 years ago once you reject the theology surrounding the person. How do you miss a person that way unless you had a relationship with him? What is it about this first century carpenter from Nazareth that fascinates the entire world like no one else ever could? Who was Jesus that even an agnostic whose career is dedicated to undermining confidence in the New Testament can still say, "Give me the God of Christmas, the God of love, the God of an innocent child in a manger who comes to bring salvation and wholeness to the world the way it was always meant to be"? Try to figure that out over the holidays. And Merry Christmas, especially to you, Bart.